Of all the album opening tracks from my record collection, there's nothing like the sound of crickets taking the listener into the night away from a busy day, trials and tribulations. Like a safe house in between the sacred and profane, a place where the music guides you without judgment. After Santana's first 3 albums, Caravanserai is a voyage of strange, beautiful music that captured my imagination as a teenager, an ethereal experience like the opening rainforest sounds of Close to the Edge. Santana joined the prestigious 4th album club of Lumpy Gravy, In Rock, Fragile, Foxtrot, Led Zeppelin 4, and Brain Salad Surgery. The 4th album magic usually culminates a period of hard work developing an identity and busy concert business schedules. Caravanserai was the only Santana album I could never add on a mixtape because I had to listen to the whole record for proper meaning. It wasn't technically jazz fusion, but a world of its own, with virtuoso emotions. It wasn't Santana going for the hits, but diving into the profound chronicles of dissatisfaction and pleasure to find healing mantras of newfound vibrations. An album with a cleansing quality, the secret monastery for Santana fans, away from best-of compilations and Grammy Award-winning comebacks. A perfect soundtrack for a long trip or commuting after work, realizing there's more to life if we pay close attention to our hearts. A transient period of self-discovery for Carlos and giant steps for the remaining Woodstock-era bandmates, plus new faces paving the road for the rest of the 70s. An album that you can only appreciate after the 1969 to 1971 period has been fully interiorized. An album you don't recommend to casual fans, and the only Latin rock album to live in the Progressive Rock Hall of Fame, next to other legendary titles. A blue desert planet of eternal caravans, where all the love of the universe comes just in time to see the sun. This is the making of Santana's Caravanserai. January 1972, past their New Year gig in Hawaii, this is the cast of musicians that went into the studio to record Santana's groundbreaking 4th album. Take a good look at them as we will explore everyone's contribution and how the songs came to be. If you haven't watched my episodes on Santana 3 and their collab with Buddy Miles, I definitely recommend these for context. As you will see in the story, Caravanserai was not only a milestone for the band, but the natural extension and byproduct of absorbing the world around them. The Bitches Brew effect put Miles Davis on the forefront of jazz, branching out to new sounds and walking in close proximity to rock and progressive music, while avant-garde legends like Ornette Coleman opened the door away from the classic jazz tradition. Miles' timing was perfect. His live at the Fillmore, Jack Johnson and double vinyl set Live Evil pissed off many purists but created a bridge between jazz and rock that touched the hearts and minds of many. Among the new wave who felt that Miles Davis' calling was Carlos Santana, thanks to bandmate and jazz connoisseur Mike Shreve, who got him hooked on Miles, the teachings of John Coltrane, and countless others from this vibrant scene. Santana's live rendition of Miles' In a Silent Way on their 1971 tour hinted a possible venture into jazz terrains, alongside their own studio albums, knocking on the doors of perception. At the works of French painter Matic Harwine on Abraxas, featuring a shared image from Bitches Brew, and the signs were there. It was just a matter of time. But above all, there's one big reason jazz fusion resonated heavily with Carlos Santana. It was the sound of what Santana conceptually was. Like Carlos said from his early days in San Francisco, he saw a group of mariachis, an Afro-Cuban percussion jam, and a blues band, and thought they could all come together into one expression. What the Santana band and Miles did back then was the same: get huge crowds of people who never listened to Latin music nor jazz into appreciating these musical styles. We can credit Santana's own Jose Chepito Areas as the first bandmate to go into jazz fusion, playing timbales on track 1 of Herbie Hancock's 1971 Wandishi. Propelled by Weather Report's May 1971 and Mahavishnu Orchestra's November 1971 debut, Santana listened to countless albums looking for new sounds and inspiration. The idea of a top 40 radio band like Santana to go into jazz fusion songs was exactly what record label executives didn't want to hear, but with big money generated from their Woodstock trilogy of albums, they managed to create their next record without interference, taking a huge chance and betting against their previous hook-oriented Latin rock. Spiritual jazz was a style of music that influenced the making of Caravanserai, following the vein of John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, and my personal favorite of his, Ascension. While Love Supreme gets all the praise in the media, Ascension confronts the listener and the whole world in a quest for liberation, expression, and freedom. A concept album was in the making, Santana just didn't know yet. The teachings of Indian American guru Paramahansa Yogananda grew very popular among youth circles. His autobiography of a yogi was a seminal work that enlightened many in their search for answers past rigid Catholic structures that ruled through fear. Hinduism and New Age philosophy became an important pillar of the 60s counterculture, thus impacting the artistic world more than once. Caravanserai's inside gatefold included a quote by the guru himself: "The body melts into the universe melts into the soundless voice, the sound melts into the all-shining light, and the light enters the bosom of infinite joy." Fun fact, John Anderson from Yes was inspired by Paramahansa Yogananda's book For Tale from Topographic Oceans, which in a way is like Yes's Caravanserai. It's a misunderstood album. Santana's lineup saw the arrival of new personnel and spirits that contributed to the musical expansion. Armando Peraza was one of the first new members to join Santana for a long studio relationship that lasted until 1990. From a Cuban generation of legends like Mongo Santamaria, he was a key figure in the creation of Latin jazz, playing with names like George Shearing and Cal Jader. Peraza was the first Afro-Cuban percussionist to play congas on a rock recording, this one being Harvey Mandel's Cristo Redentor from 1968, just 1 year before Santana's debut. Santana had bassist Tom Rutley step in the shoes of David Brown midway through September 1971. He did a fine job filling in the position, but his sound was more acoustic bass oriented, thus Carlos and Mike Shreve wanted someone else. If there's something that defines Caravanserai, is a confident bass sound and drive. The man responsible was Doug Roach. His name stuck with Carlos after watching Doug play with Voices of East Harlem at the Tanglewood 1970 concert next to the Santana Band and Miles Davis. Voices of East Harlem played a March 1971 concert for Ghana, where Santana played with Willie Bobo. This trip was key in getting Doug closer to Mike Shreve and the rest of the band. Doug Roach arrived in San Francisco in 1971. He got connected to the scene landing gigs with The Loading Zone and Gabor Szabo's band, where he met keyboard player Tom Coster. Both Doug and Tom became members of Santana in early 1972. Now, for those who think Neil Schon and Greg Raleigh had left Santana, they were still around and added their own contributions on the new record before leaving the band for good. Journey's first recording sessions were still some 2 years away. In the same working conditions as Santana 3, they reconvened at Columbia Studios, San Francisco, making the smart choice of using the same sound engineers from their third album, Glenn Kolotkin and Mike Larner. Glenn's resume at the time included Moby Grape's Grape Jam, the 1968 Jewel, the United States of America's self-titled album. Guys, this record is amazing. The Live Adventures of Mike Bloomfield and Al Cooper, The Electric Flags and American Music Band, 1969's Aorta, a psychedelic treat that starts with a pulsating beat that Pink Floyd used on Dark Side of the Moon. Don't believe me? Check this out. Kolakin also engineered Santana 3's guest backing vocals, Sweet Linda Divine, Pacific Gas and Electric's Are You Ready, and many more. Mike Lardner's list of albums included 1971's Choice Quality Stuff Anytime by San Francisco's own It's a Beautiful Day. I find this psychedelic rock album cover to be somewhat prophetic of Caravanserai's Camels. One of the most interesting aspects of Santana's recording process was the absence of previous touring chaos. With their first 3 albums doing very well, they had the luxury of using Columbia Studios as an extension of the creative process, and for the first time since 1968, able to work on the songs exclusively without playing concerts in between. Santana didn't return to the stage until September 1972. There was a monastery quality to Caravanserai, with everyone focused on the music, immersed in the process away from distractions and frenzy of life on the road. Now, Caravanserai is a Persian word for palace or building with enclosed courts. The caravan was a group of travelers from far away that could sleep and recover from their long journeys. Modern caravanserais, of course, could be motels or inn accommodations you see next to big highways. What some Santana members were doing was just that, resting their minds and bodies from 3 years of non-stop touring. Before I do a breakdown of all 10 songs on the album, I need to highlight this part of my research. Looking at the recording dates, we see a total of 9 sessions with just 2 songs laid out on tape on the same day for March 1st. Each recording block speaks of an organic process of transformation and development within the band's new core lineup. The February sessions sound a lot like Santana 3, with traces of jungle strut. March opened the door into Latin progressive rock, working around the energy of frenetic improvisation. April sounds like gratitude and arrival into the mindset of possible. The last session on May 5th is a fitting coda and closure of the ways of the past. The recording dates were a tremendous insight that helps me understand a personal opinion I couldn't put into words before, until now. There's a reason Caravanserai is my second favorite Santana release behind the third album. I've always felt the original track listing has some strong contrast energies and moods that can sometimes saturate my emotional processing of the record, where free jazz and classical avant-garde works don't. The band themselves struggled to find a proper running order for these tunes, and I can't blame them, but as a hardcore fan and documentarian, I question the final selection. More often than not, I found myself exhausted after La Fuente del Ritmo, knowing it shares a similar instrumental concept to a relentless attack of every step of the way. I know this is going to be a controversial statement, but I don't believe Every Step of the Way was a proper ending for the album. It's a killer track, yes, but it leaves a big question mark that musicianship alone can't justify. Look where it sits on Santana's average concert setlist for 1973, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. You can check out a link in the description below for a special playlist I made with the songs in the order they were recorded. This track listing actually enhances the Caravanserai experience for both people who love the album and those who were let down after the Woodstock trilogy. Just one word of advice, ignore some of the crossfade stuff on some of the songs. Trust me on this playlist, it makes the instrumentals shine, while the vocal stuff narrative is way more effective. The cricket sound after Waves Within really helps you digest the spiritual awakening of such a powerful track. The closing number, Song of the Wind, is gentle, allowing the listener to get up and prepare to leave the caravan back into the real world with a sense of hope. I think Santana deep down knew this, as 1973's Welcome ends on a similar note. Borboleta ends with a therapeutic percussion solo, and Amigos has an uplifting anthem. Just in Time to See the Sun was the first song to be recorded at Columbia Studios, some 8 months after the sessions for Santana 3, with the same group from 1971's outtake Bambeye. It moves around the chord of D minor, with vocals from both Carlos and Greg Raleigh, who goes for the strong registers and organ duties. While Carlos plays lead guitar, he's backed up by Neil Sean, Doug Rauch on bass, and the rhythm section of Chepito Areas, Mingo Lewis, and Mike Shreve. The song's lyrics read as an early morning prayer, hoping for spiritual forgiveness as the caravan travels back into their journey. With an opening Hammond sound and jam motif in A minor, it's like a mid-tempo version of 1971's Jungle Strut. This song is a transition vehicle with a melodic theme that goes into D major, F major, C major, and a rhythm cue in B flat. The track's most valuable player is of course Doug Rauch on bass, with his signature slapping technique that creates a groovy funk vibration where Chepito Areas lays a fast monologue on timbales. Fun fact, Doug Rauch is also credited on rhythm guitar, next to Neil Sean, on this song. Future Primitive was a brief Latin percussion spotlight that begins with a sinister keyboard sound, courtesy of Santana's drummer, Mike Shreve. Chepito Areas plays congas and insane timbales here, while James Mingo Lewis adds his own passionate work on the congas as well. La Fuente del Ritmo features James Mingo Lewis as the sole composer for this track, and it's no surprise considering his later ventures as bandleader, with 1976 Flight Never Ending and Al Di Meola's Secret Weapon on his first trilogy of albums. Mingo Lewis wrote some of Di Meola's best tracks like The Wizard, Flight Over Rio, and Chasing the Voodoo. Santana's La Fuente del Ritmo is a tight Latin rock workout around the key of D minor, with lead guitar interventions by Carlos. The acoustic bass of Tom Rutley joins forces with the jazz piano fusion style of Tom Coster. Armando Peraza steals some of the thunder, soloing on bongos. Mike Shreve holds the pieces together with his signature fast-paced attack. Rhythm guitar duties were played by Neil Sean. If Mingo Lewis was the composer before, it was a turn for Mike Shreve, with his own creative expedition by the name of Every Step of the Way, with clear references to Miles Davis on the intro, while Chepito keeps a steady cowbell pulse. Greg Raleigh played organ, and Tom Rutley reprised his acoustic bass role. Neil and Carlos performed guitar duties. The orchestra arrangement was done by American trumpet player and composer Tom Harrell. Among his many jazz works, he also played on Azteca's first album and many Charlie Brown TV specials. Now, the maniac voice and flute solo we hear in the song was provided by jazz musician himself, Hadley Kalaman. The only cover tune on the album, and a strange choice indeed, that because of its style, it made sense to have Tom Rutley again on acoustic bass. Written by Brazilian composer Antonio Carlos Jobim, it was released on his 1970 record by the name of Stoneflower. Santana choosing this track was prophetic of later Welcome and Borboleta endeavors. I still wonder why they chose this one and dared to write lyrics for a number that was already a powerful instrumental. Unlike Jingo, Oye Como Va, Jungle Strut, and Para los Rumberos, Santana's version didn't add much to the original. With the vocals somewhat buried in the mix, we are left to enjoy the rhythmic vitality of Latin rock taking over Jobim's creation. Besides Greg Rowley's organ sound, we have the jazz piano chops of Wendy Haas, who later played with Azteca, as well as returning for vocals on Santana's Welcome. Written by both guitarists Carlos and Neil Schon, it starts off with the tape echo delay effect for quite an epic introduction. The guitar arpeggio we hear is an idea we can trace back to January 1972 and the album with Buddy Miles. The Matador-style riff moves in G and C, which is an inversion of the same style segment from Toussaint the Overture, going G and C. Bridges Brew's own Lenny White played castanets on this track. The song's lyrics speak to the core of New Age ideas living in the present for fulfillment and gratitude. Vocals here were sang by Carlos, Mingo Lewis, and Rico Reyes, the same guy we hear in Santana 3's Guajira. My absolute favorite track from the album, and one of Carlos' most spiritually charged guitar solos ever. Mostly written by Doug Roach with Greg Rowley's tasteful organ arrangement, it's the most ambitious composition on the album. Why? Well, because Doug managed to work with odd time signatures that explore the Mahavishnu Orchestra effect that greatly impacted Carlos and Mike Shreve. I managed to get a sheet music copy of the song and fix it as it had a 10/8 meter when it's actually 9/4. You can count this like one dotted half note that you can count as 3, and then 6 quarter notes to complete the bar. I personally just count 9 pulsations or hits. It's easier for me to keep track of time this way. What we hear on the album is an exquisite blend of Latin jazz and jazz rock coming into one expression. The chord run starts off with the jazz favorite A minor 9th, then moving into B minor 7th, where the ascending guitar riff happens. Next is F major 7 and C for a cathartic question that ends up on G6. This sequence is played throughout waves within, and the effect is magical. Carlos Santana's use of feedback and his lightning speed descending string attack became 2 of his favorite signature tricks later on his career. I'm always inspired by this number, in awe of Carlos' lyricism on the guitar, and Neil Schon responds with a harmonizing effect that builds to infinity. And I don't mean Journey's 4th album, but actual infinity. Now there's a third guitar player on the song by the name of Doug Rodriguez, or Doug Rodriguez. He played with Doug Roach on a 1970 psychedelic rock release by the name of Music. This album was produced by Eddie Kramer and engineered by Bob Ludwig of Led Zeppelin II fame. Doug Rodriguez also played with the voices of East Harlem next to his buddy, Doug Roach. Recorded by engineer Glenn Kolotkin in his backyard, the sound of crickets is haunting and refreshing. Hadley Kalaman played saxophone as conductor, signaling the road where the adventure begins. While many critics have stated Pharoah Sanders' Astral Traveling as the inspiration for the song, check out Hadley Kalaman's 1971 track by the name of Iapetus. It was definitely an influence on this track as well. Neil Schon played some Bitches Brew inspired guitar next to Tom Bradley on acoustic bass for Tom's last ever song with Santana. Wendy Haas on what sounds like a Fender Rhodes piano adds the sonic color palette to Mike Shreve's groove, plus Mingo Lewis and Carlos on percussion. Inspired by Gabor Szavo's take on Breezin', released in April 1971, comes Song of the Wind, in which Carlos makes a special tribute to his guitar hero.
Fantastic spellbinding music by Gabor Szavo.
Note, Szavo's version came 5 years before George Benson's own take on the song. Neil Schon, Mike Shreve, and Carlos wrote this 2-chord Latin jazz trip of guitars, surrendering to the beauty of life itself. Greg Rowley's organ elevates the tune into forever, next to the passion and rhythm work of Mingo Lewis. Speaking about Mike Shreve, he wasn't happy with his original drum take on the basic tracks, so after everybody else was done, he practiced to the tape and re-recorded his drum parts in a single sit-down the next day. One of the sound engineers was terrified. Had Shreve made a mistake, he would have ruined the whole tape, forcing everyone to start over from scratch. The end result is a virtuoso display of dynamics, knowing when to hit hard and when to flow in subtlety. A swan song for the Santana band. Neil Schon and Greg Rowley left the group after this recording session. Past the fourth album sessions, there was no concert activity in the Santana camp, outside of releasing a live album with Buddy Miles on June 7th, which you can check my episode on the making of this record. The new Santana lineup kept themselves busy rehearsing for their most ambitious tour yet, a 155 concert date series that would take them through 4 continents. Keyboard player Richard Kermode was brought into Santana before the tour began. He played with Janis Joplin at Woodstock, as well as recording Malo's first 2 albums. With Richard on board, the group was ready with Doug Roach, Mike Shreve, Tom Coster, Jose Chepito Areas, James Mingo Lewis, Carlos Santana, and Armando Peraza. Carlos was still looking for an album title and found it via Paraman's Yoganan's quote, "The caravan is the eternal cycle of reincarnation, every soul going into and out of life, from death to life and back again, until you arrive at a place where you can rest and achieve an inner peace. That place is the Caravanserai." With an album concept ready, Joan Chase from Heavy Water Light Show delivered a striking cover of 2 complementary colors, blue and orange, that summed up the waves within of 1972. Columbia Records president Clive Davis' reaction to the album was not positive, with him telling the band it was career suicide. Carlos moved forward and was thrilled at the idea. In a competitive year for rock releases such as Exile on Main Street, Deep Purple's Combo, and the progressive rock force of Foxtrot, Close to the Edge, Thick as a Brick, and Trilogy to name a few, Caravanserai was released on the same day as Miles Davis' jazz fusion odyssey On the Corner, with a huge list of personnel, including John McLaughlin, or McLaughlin. I'm yet to find the correct pronunciation for John's last name. Caravanserai debuted at number 65 on Billboard's 200 list in November 1972, with its highest position at number 8 in December. Looking at the data, we can see it slowly lost momentum. By June 1973, it was almost gone from the charts. Fans were torn between two camps. Those who enjoyed instrumentals had a blast with this exploratory album. Those who wanted hits had nothing to hold on to. Caravanserai found its niche through progressive rock and jazz fusion fans who embraced the sounds of Santana's Leap of Faith. Now, because this instrumental sound was not so much different from the Woodstock trilogy, I believe what hurt sales the most was the lack of hooks in what was more a musician's album than a top 40 release. Soul Sacrifice, Jingo, Samba Pati, Batuka, Jungle Strut, these were all catchy. Caravanserai was a different game. It was a luxurious retreat into the group's psyche, away from radio expectations. The start of the second trilogy of albums for Santana was not commercially promising, with Welcome and Borboleta selling half the copies Caravanserai did and charting outside the top 20 on Billboard. It's only with each passing year and Santana's gigantic discography that the fourth album has achieved a well-deserved cult following. It was remastered in 2003 with a disappointing track listing of no bonus tracks nor liner notes on the album's creative process. Because it has the classic Santana sound just before the revolving door of lineups slowly took over, one can always enjoy the freshness of this unique set of elements and trajectory. The more commercial and conceptually lost Santana got past Amigos, the more Caravanserai works as the lost child of the Woodstock trilogy and Lotus. It's there in between, always welcoming the listener into forever. A personal experience to the sound of music with enough challenges to make you wonder, but with enough love to give you hope. We don't know if progressive rock band Camel helped to boost sales for Caravanserai, having fans thinking it was another British prog rock album. What we do know is that in late 1972, Santana cut his hair and began his quest for love, devotion, and surrender, adding another chapter on his travels. This was the making of Caravanserai. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more. Bye bye.